I was shooting a film back in 2013, and we had a DeLorean as a prop. And people were getting out of their cars and taking pictures of the DeLorean. And I knew that day, Back to the Future was always important to me, but I realized that day how important it was to everybody else. And that wow moment, it just inspired me to go out and make a documentary.
It's a film for the fans, by the fans. They supported us. It was a huge responsibility to give them the content that they wanted. We couldn't make a fourth installment of the trilogy, of course, but at least we could provide additional content for them that they could be entertained by, they could watch, get insight and stories, and just see other ways of integrating the film into everyday life. And that's kind of what we did. It was the cultural relevance. So how is this film important in everyday culture? And that's what we kind of hit on. And knowing that this was crowdfunded kept us honest with everything, because we knew this wouldn't happen without them. We need to deliver for them. This isn't something that we can control. This is controlled by them. We're just the puppets that are doing it for them.
I mean, a huge credit goes first to Adam F. Goldberg, creator of ABC's The Goldbergs. He jumped on board day 2 of this project. You know, he wanted to produce this with us, and he was a huge help with probably the biggest name, Michael J. Fox. Directly got us Michael J. Fox, which opened other doors. The rest of that answer is just the production team that I had behind me, especially this guy who worked phones like no other, you know, and just made it happen. Bob Gale was a big supporter of us from day 1 as well. So when it was a matter of getting Leah Thompson for an interview, it's not that she'd ever said no, it was just her schedule was crazy. But when we were getting down to the wire production-wise, Lee called Bob Gale, said, "Bob, you know, we haven't gotten Leah yet." Bob called Leah within a half hour. We had an interview scheduled 4 days from then. So, just a lot of luck and hard work, I guess. Yeah. So the two that are noticeably missing. I mean, certainly, you know, we don't have a Biff's hoverboard gang, but the two that are noticeably missing are Tom Wilson and Crispin Glover. They just don't do Back to the Future anymore. And if this were a documentary about the making of Back to the Future, I would probably feel like we're incomplete. You know, if you look at just the first movie, where we're celebrating 30th anniversary, those two, second to Michael and Chris, those are the two main actors. I mean, even Leah's role is secondary to them. So to not have them be a problem, but it's not. This is a documentary about the fandom of Back to the Future. Having all the cast and crew that we have in there is great. It's supporting material, and we do tell the story about making Back to the Future, but we don't need every voice. So the fact that they're not really doing Back to the Future anymore, it didn't really hurt us. It wasn't something that we felt like we couldn't go on without. I think we definitely all have different answers for that. For me, Robert Zemeckis, being the director of this film and interviewing the director of Back to the Future was a very special, surreal moment for me. So, so that was pretty big. What about you?
I would say, you know, it was a funny. James Tolkien, who plays Strickland. We had a blast going up there and meeting him, and up to Lake Placid. He's just such a. I mean, I hate to break it to the fans, but he's a really sweet guy, and he's not this hard ass that everybody thinks he is. He's an actor, and he's a very good actor, and he welcomed us into his home. He's got tons of animals that were walking in and out of the shop the whole time. He's got tons of land. I mean, he's just a beautiful man, and it was really nice to. That was my most fun.
I'd say for me it was Bill and Patrick Shea. You know, the first interview that we did for the first Kickstarter. It was the first shoot that we did, and we drove up to the house. There's a sign out front that says "Welcome, Jay, Lewis, and team." They had sandwiches with chips, and it was just
and their cookies. Don't forget
the cookies. Yes. So having that be the first experience really was like, if everyone else is like this is going to be amazing, because the people are just so amazing. And so, you know, yes, the celebrities from the film were great, and seeing those, but the human connection for me, and even still to this day, is just such a warm, open, generous, welcoming family. I haven't met more amazing people than that family. You know, they're just good people.
No, and it's interesting because we're looking forward to our next project, and you learn so much in life doing anything, But we learned so much on this project, and going forward, I think that will be the next documentary. The amount of time we spent in pre-production here was limited. It was more like, let's do it. And my personality, I'm a very jumpy, like I'll jump at anything. It's like, so I'd hear a story and I'd be on the phone with Lee in 5 minutes. Lee, we gotta go film this right now. We gotta go to California. We gotta go to Mexico.
I'm Googling. I'm like, all right, then you need to watch this documentary first because they did it first.
So anytime like a story came in, I'd call you or you, and it's, we gotta go film this. We gotta get this story. This is it. How many times did I tell you this is the story that's gonna make this documentary?
We needed to stop shooting, and every time Jay finds a new human interest piece or someone else jumps in, I'm like, I thought we were done shooting 3 months ago. Yeah, we gotta get the story. It's amazing.
Yeah. So that to a fault was probably.
Our agents told them to stop at some point too. They were like, "Yo, the film needs to be done. You gotta stop." And Jay's like, "I got 2 more."
We all have Back to the Future Google awards. So like, oh, do you see this? We gotta put that in there now. And this guy.
And having 2 Kickstarter projects was a big deal because we've been in front of the public since the day we started. So when we ran the second Kickstarter, which put us in front of a new audience of people, I had gotten emails from people like, "Hey, just so you know, I'm the biggest Back to the Future fan and XYZ." And I was like, "Oh, we gotta film this. We gotta, Marco Pasqua, who's in our trailer, he has the guy with cerebral palsy in a wheelchair. He was one of those people. And ironically, he's a senior associate producer on our project. He contacted me because he wanted to give us money to produce the film. But in his email, when I saw his story, that's what I was looking at. I was like, wait a minute, this is... And it worked out that we were going to be in Vancouver on another work shoot, and we were able to film it. So
Adam Contras.
Yes,
right?
Adam Contras, the mini golf guy in our documentary. We were in LA we were interviewing Robert Zemeckis. Yeah. We were literally in between Dan Harmon and Robert Zemeckis. And we had 4 hours to kill. This was
a celebrity trip, basically.
And we had 4 hours to kill, and the guy's like, "Hey," and he didn't know we were in LA. He goes, "Hey, saw your documentary. Just wanted you to check this out." The CBS News, or I don't remember what station it was, had done a piece about this guy who built a mini golf course in his backyard, highlighted by a Back to the Future hole and a full-size DeLorean time machine. And we're like, you know what? We got 2 hours tomorrow. We're coming.
And it was a blast. It was a great guy.
Listen, a lot of passion projects are done by people who don't necessarily do film for a living, or it's a side project or a hobby. This is what we do every day. There were a lot of things that I knew going in. One of the things that I knew early on was this wasn't going to be a narrated documentary. That's just not how I like to tell stories. I thought that this should be the people, the players, people in there telling the stories. And then Tom Griffin, who was the editor on this project, I mean, I give the guy so much credit. I was so ingrained in this, so like buried in, in this project that it was almost impossible for me to even begin in terms of what's going to get cut and what's going to stay. We had a moment during the editing of this documentary where, very candidly, Tom wrote us an email and he goes, "It sucks. I hate it." and this was like a long. That was the summary of like a 3-page email. And he goes, "Guys," "just give me 3 days." And he turned out the time what was 2 hours into an hour and a half. Ripped 30 minutes out of the documentary to bring the story back together because we had so much, and we were trying to make too many things to too many people. And the storytelling of this documentary, and without taking the credit for it, it's amazing. Yes.
I think a lot of it was there were the two that weren't important at first, then became important after Tom was tinkering with it all. So maybe
I think we were at a point where it wasn't even this material isn't important. We had to cut out a lot of stuff in our film that was still very important, and it was. I think we never got to a point where we had so much in the film that there was stuff that wasn't important that we need to remove. Everything in there is important, and we have so much backlog that we could do another 22-minute episode about another story. I'd say a lot in the beginning there was some stuff that ultimately wasn't as important. I do want to kind of not say the wrong thing.
Yeah, no, I think what he's talking about, we had filmed because we just jumped into the ring. If you look at our first Kickstarter trailer compared to the second, we were very niche focused on the DeLorean when we started this project. These were supposed to be stories that in some way related to the DeLorean. So Terry and Oliver Holler, how they drive the DeLorean around, collect money. Bill and Patrick Shea, they have the screen use DeLorean. But this became so much bigger than that, and we had filmed something very early on. It was a DeLorean convention, and the whole thing didn't make it into the film at all. just because it didn't fit the narrative anymore. Yet it is a bonus feature on the Blu-ray because it was great footage, and it's like, how do you just get rid of that? And to answer your question from the other side, which is, was there something that you didn't think was important that became important? The thing that sticks out most is Dan Harmon. I don't watch Community. I hadn't heard of Rick and Morty until we interviewed him, which now I think is great. But I barely even knew who Dan Harmon was. And Lee calls me and says, we should interview this guy, Dan Harmon. Tells me about his background.
It's on the podcast.
Yeah, the podcast. And I go in to the interview, and I don't, especially once we got towards the middle of this process, I didn't go in with written questions anymore. It was just, I knew exactly what I wanted to ask. And I go in and sit down with this guy, and this interview went places that are like, his interview uncut is gold. I mean, eventually some of this stuff will get out, but his understanding of film and structure and just specifically to Back to the Future, his insight of it is, it's beyond what anyone else could even, you know, it's no one else has described Back to the Future in the way he does.
Yeah, I mean, it was the insight into this movie that we were then after we're talking about. Son of a, it is about a guy just trying to save his family. How did we not realize that from the very beginning? All these different insights that he put into it. And then we saw him at was it San Diego. We said,
San Diego.
You know, he says, guys, it was all shucks. I hope that.
Yeah, he goes, did I make the film?
Well, you open and close the film. Are you crazy?
Super smart guy.
It was great. And actually, yeah.
Yeah, and it's going to be completely revelatory to anyone that watches it because it's a story that's literally never been told before. So I ain't going to tell it here, but I'll give you the background. We had we had the opportunity to sit down with Frank Price, who was at the helm of Universal at the time Back to the Future was made, and he had been at Columbia. So when they made used cars, he was with the Bobs back at Columbia, and he actually signed the Bobs to do the initial deal for Back to the Future. Anyway, we're sitting in his gorgeous townhouse in Santa Monica, interviewing him, and he tells us his story. And he was one of the later interviews, so we were almost like holding a place for him in the edit. It was very late in the process, and we put this story in. So Frank Price tells us his story, sort of about how the licensing ended up getting from Paramount to Universal, and we immediately throw it in the film. It was a great story, and he's a great storyteller. We put it in the film. It's now in every edit of the film. Lee and I had dinner with Bob Gale at San Diego Comic-Con. San Diego?
San Diego, yeah.
So Lee and I have dinner with Bob Gale, and we tell Bob this story over dinner. We're like, yeah, you know that story about da-da-da Frank Price tells us? He goes, yeah, it's not true. And Lee and I look at each other and we're like, we're like, oh shit. Like, what are we gonna... And it was like, we didn't react to Bob.
He goes, E&O insurance.
Insurance!
So like, we didn't react to Bob, but the whole rest of the dinner, we're just thinking like, oh God, what are we gonna do?
Hi, Bob, gotta go.
As we're walking back to Bob's hotel, we walk Bob back to his hotel, and we're just walking in the street, and he stops in his tracks, and he goes, you know what? That story that you told, I know how it could be true. And he kind of walks through it, and then the next day, I had to go back to Frank Price's house to get photos for B-roll for the film. I said, you know, Frank, we told this story to Bob last night, and he said he didn't even know it could be true. And Frank says, that's because I never told it to anyone ever. So this is a story that's in our documentary. Frank's older now; he's in his late 80s, and you know he's sort of in that reflective mode in his life, and gave us one of those pieces of sort of that old Hollywood that
I think that was. I was hoping our film would have something like that. It's 30 years later. There's already one or maybe even two documentaries about like the making of the trilogy and just the basic backstories. And I was worried, and we didn't want our film to be that. But I was hoping we'd get one or two things from somebody. And once we got that story from Frank Price, I was like, yes, thank God. And when I see it in the film, it really gives me that we got some inside information. We didn't think there could be anything left that wasn't told. That story was awesome to get.
And this is going to be, the way that Back to the Future appeals to the mass public. When you see the behind-the-scenes stuff in our film, that'll be new to most people. I mean, to the vast majority of the world that's going to watch this documentary, that'll be new. To the hardcore Back to the Future fans, I mean, yeah. A lot of the stuff in the first 35 minutes of our film, they'll have seen already. So, just echoing what Lewis said, it is nice to know that we got something new after 30 years.
Because the big thing, it was the cultural relevance, but still, I know there's fans that want to get something new. Hearing about how important or the effect the film had on culture, that's one thing. But as a diehard fan, tell me something more about the film, something I didn't know. And that was a challenge, I think. And the three of us would talk and be like, it's not something that we need to have in our film because we're talking about something else, but it's good to have. What can we get?
Yeah, I mean, everyone knows that Eric Stoltz, and I say everyone. Anyone who's like a part of the Back to the Future world knows that Eric Stoltz used to be Marty McFly. But there's a big piece of that in our film because I can't tell you how many friends of mine will call me and be like, I didn't know there was another Marty. So, that's... Not
like it was a refrigerator. But, Turn to the Road, the time machine was a refrigerator in the beginning, but, anyone that we interviewed or down on the fan side knew all of this. And we kind of put this together thinking these are going to be the people that watch this. Guys like us, guys that we interview is going to be to watch it. And there's a whole now that we've learned of people who are young, they're coming up, 12, 13, 16, 18-year-olds who haven't seen the older docs. And so that's why having that, I think, this one frame price point, we just talked over 20 minutes, but it was important to us because it gave us the ability to deliver something that essentially no one else has yet.
And also, what's going to happen, the Frank Price stuff and a lot of other stuff from our movie, if you go to the IMDb page for Back to the Future 1, 2, or 3, and you look at the trivia, it just goes on and on and on. There's going to be stuff that I'll put on there from our movie. And
there actually is already. There already is a trivia question on our IMDb page.
Well, on ours or theirs?
Ours.
No, but what I'm saying is we've discovered more Back to the Future history for the fans. But now that gets to be living permanently. We now have become part of the Back to the Future.
There's a trivia question in the future about something that came out of our film.
No, that's going to be great. That's going to be great. You're not talking about how Back to the Future predicted 9/11 and all that other stuff that people are saying.
That came out the other day. I couldn't even watch it. It infuriated me. I was like, oh my god, how did they connect it to? And I couldn't.
I think that goes back to Tom because each of us, me the most certainly, got so involved in this project that it's hard to be objective and edit. I mean, I've developed so many personal friends that we've interviewed from this project, and then it's like, well, how do I cut that guy saying this? So that's where Tom, as an editor, and by the way, by the end, Tom was as ingrained in the project as any of us, but when you give it to a third party, and I have a good friend who's a filmmaker who really handles everything from shooting to editing to, and we've had this conversation, it's like, you have to be able to relinquish control at some point so that you can, I think if I would have tried to edit this, not that I can't edit, I edited the original trailer and everything, but to step away from it makes it better. We shot over 50 interviews. It's probably somewhere about between 40 and 50 hours of interviews.
The movie's 20 hours long.
Yeah, exactly. The first cut was what, 2 hours 45?
The first cut was over 4 hours, which was not meant.
Was like, this is great. What is this? Like, no, I'm not watching this.
And we shot in Cinerama, so the whole thing was going to be.
It wasn't meant to be a cut. It was meant to be a bed, a story bed, and then we decide like what stays and what goes. But yeah, it was over 4 hours. I was scared that day because the editor said you're going to come to my place and watch this thing for 4 hours, and I didn't know how I would sit through it. I legitimately was worried for that day about sitting through this for 4 hours. There's not a ton. We probably have about 7 different features. There's a great behind-the-scenes video which we revealed this morning to the crowd that was at the panel. That the Western story is on there. We have one uncut answer from every cast member that was in the film. I know I'm forgetting stuff.
Was that the same question?
No, it was a different. Oh, there's one thing where I delved more into the DeLorean since there was so much material on that. So just a whole piece about DeLorean. But the cast member thing was cool because when you see the documentary, you realize like nobody talks for more than. They certainly don't talk as much as we do. The way it's cut, it's 10 seconds here and 10 seconds here. So to have a beginning to end answer from everyone in the cast is really cool. We try to pick a heartfelt moment where they can sort of think it through, and that's one of the nice features on there.
And because we talk so much, there is no director or filmmaker commentary because it would be longer than the movie.
Exactly, we don't have space.
You'd just be watching black screen for like another 45 minutes.
So we've been banging around a lot of stuff. I have a sports background. I have a master's degree from NYU, so I have a couple sports things that I really want to do. Something about injuries, youth sports, and whatever. So the problem is success is a problem in some ways because we probably have 20 ideas that would have been great documentaries before Back in Time. But when you're coming off this project, for all of us in all of our careers, it's a huge stepping stone to do something else. And you have to make sure you do the right thing. I mean, it's not going to be comic book related, but something that fits in line with this to continue our careers in the right direction.
Bar, we want to make sure that the next piece of content exceeds that expectation.
Yeah, not even from a content standpoint. Just want to make sure that the appeal is right and all that kind of stuff. So we'll see, but I think January December will relax a little bit, and then January, I don't know, maybe I'm dreaming.
January since July, you guys haven't since July of 2013.
2013.
Right, July?
Yeah, and then, I mean, I would say, in all seriousness, in 2015, I don't think there's been a day that we've worked less than, 16 hours.
And we worked, I think we said that at least one of us worked every day.
For sure.
Somebody was doing emails, somebody was making phone calls, and then it was making lists. Okay, we're going to talk about this on Monday or whatever. It was constant. I mean, when you work for yourselves, every day is a work day, and because nobody knows who we are while we're making this film, we've got to make sure that we're beating down every door we can. It's helpful to have the name Back to the Future in what you're doing, but ultimately, you've really got to push. So it's been a labor. It's been a labor of love, but it's been a labor. Yeah.